with what I'm going to talk about now. I'm hoping I can contextualise some of the ideas that came up this morning, particularly in a theoretical context and particularly in the context of higher education. So as Helen said, I am professor of professional learning, which basically bemuses me as much as it bemuses anyone else. And I'm not quite sure how that happened, but really my research is around play, it's around games in higher education. And I'm going to talk for the next half an hour or so about why I think play is really important, not just for children, but at all stages in education. And it's particularly important for modern students. We live in a really uncertain world, and as Ian said this morning, most of our students coming through our education system are going to be in jobs that don't even exist yet. We have to be adaptable, changing career every few years. We have to be able to take risks, and we have to be resilient. And we have to create students who have these skills, which is one of the reasons I think play is really important. But underpinning that, what is really important is understanding failure. I wanted to start with a story about one of the big failures of my university career. And this is the story of my great unrequited love affair as an undergraduate. So I'm going to introduce you to him in a moment. It was just destined not to work. He was a bit too piratey for me. And when it came down to it, he was far too pixelated. So can I just have a show of hands? Let's show your age. Who knows who this is? Yes! So this is Guybrush Threepwood, Mighty Pirate. And I spent most of my first year at university playing Monkey Island rather than actually doing any work, which would explain why I had to go and resit. But for me, it's only now, looking back from a theoretical perspective, I can actually understand why it was so powerful. Because I grew up a child of the 80s. I spent a lot of time with my ZX Spectrum, typing in games that then didn't work, and playing Spectrum adventure games. And the frustrating thing about Spectrum adventure games, I don't think I ever finished one, because you'd get so far, and you'd fail, and you'd get kicked back to the start, and you'd go again, and you'd try something else, and it would take you despite the fact it would take you 20 minutes to load the game in the first place, which was in itself a game, you'd get in, you'd get kicked back. And it was this idea of constant failure. Now, failure in games is really important, but actually there gets a point where the failure, it ceases to be fun. And where Monkey Island, I think, was really different from all other types of adventure games at that time, was it had this idea of the microfail. Now, it is practically impossible to die in Monkey Island. There are two ways to do it. One involves going and actually standing at the bottom of a river for 10 minutes. I'm not quite sure how anyone found that one out. But you can not succeed. So actually you can try anything. You have this free space to try and play and try silly things. But you're not going to fail. And it took me ages to do. It's a really hard game. It involves lots of lateral thinking. It involves lots of really clever puzzles. It taught me loads about, how to deal with a chicken with a pulley through the middle and other useful life skills. But lots about problem solving, lots about lateral thinking. And most importantly, I think, I really like this idea of a kind of Monkey Island model of games and failure. And I think it presents a new paradigm for failure, which I'm going to talk about a bit later on. I do have some graphs. And I have some Venn diagrams, which are my favourite things. So, and I do have a picture of a snow leopard for any big cat fans in the audience, so don't worry, that's coming up too. So, I want to talk about failure. And the reason that I think failure is so interesting is that we don't recognise it. We recognise the successes. The things we remember are the things that are the successes. So Ian said before that Angry Birds was the 51st game made by and we don't recognise the 50 failed games. We don't recognise that process of failure, and we don't laud and celebrate our failures. So it's worth remembering that before Harry Potter was actually published, J.K. Rowling was rejected 12 times. We don't remember the 12 rejections. We don't remember the times that the Beatles were rejected from various auditions before they finally got a recording contract. Slightly apocryphal potentially is Thomas Edison and the light bulb. We don't remember the times, the years and years and years of failure before a commercially light bulb was created. And I particularly love a quote of Thomas Edison's, which is, that he didn't fail 1,000 times to create a light bulb, he succeeded in 1,001 steps. And I think this is very much the way that we need to be thinking about failure. Failure is absolutely inevitable. Whatever we do, everybody can't live a charmed life. We're going to have to deal with failure, and it's absolutely essential, because without understanding failure and how important that is for learning, we can't deal with risk. And without dealing with risk and knowing how to manage risk and how to take risks safely and how to be resilient when we do fail, we are stifling creativity and we're stifling innovation. So I think this is so absolutely crucial to underpinning education at the moment. As a young child, failure is absolutely inevitable. I've got two little people, and they spent the first 2 years failing to walk and then failing to talk. But it wasn't failing, it was all part of a learning process. They wanted to be able to walk and talk, so they fell down a lot, they spoke a lot of rubbish, and now they can walk and talk, and I spend all my time telling them to sit down and shut up. But it's an inevitable, as a child, it's an inevitable part of the learning process that we don't even question. But somehow, between early years and university, we lose that kind of link between failure being an inevitable part of what we're learning. And I think part of the problem in higher education is that actually we don't give learners enough chance to fail. That the system that we have in education is all about passing, it's all about rewarding success. It's not about saying, actually, failure is inevitable, and what we need to do is we need to be able to deal with it and to learn from it. Because actually, failing well and failing better is the sort of key message that we need to be getting through to students. And I think it's the area where we're actually failing our students. So I did say there'd be a bit of theory. I promise there's only a tiny little bit. But I want to introduce you to the magic circle. Can I just get a show of hands from who's familiar with the magic circle? Great, so most people. I should say, I discovered recently that there is a theory in early years learning called the magic circle of play, which involves small children sitting around in a circle. This isn't the magic circle I'm talking about. I'm talking about the magic circle which comes from game studies, which originated, it's generally said to originate with Huizinga, but if you go back to the original text, he kind of mentions it in a throwaway. And then it was picked up by Selen and Zimmerman in a brilliant book, The Rules of Play, which I would recommend anyone who's interested in the area read. They describe the magic circle as a physical or temporal space in which games are played. But I think you can go a step further, because actually what's important about the magic circle is it's a mutually constructed space. And the people who are in the magic circle, and potentially some of the spectators, understand that the magic circle exists. And in the magic circle, the rules of play are different. And those people who are in them understand what's going on. So you can see this. It could be constructed through artifacts and through formal rules. So you see two people playing chess. And in real life, if you want that person's king, the easiest way to get the king is to pick it up and run away and go, I've got the king. But we don't do that, because that's not in the rules of chess. That's breaking the magic circle. Likewise, when you go into a pub and you see some of your friends bantering, and actually, if you deconstruct banter, it's two people being really offensive to one another. But that's fine, because it's in the rules of the setting and the magic circle of being in a pub with your mates. Likewise, you see children playing, and they're in their magic circle of playing with their dolls and playing with whatever artifacts and toys are in that constructed circle. And actually, I think watching children play is a really interesting way to see how you can break the magic circle. So I remember my two girls were playing. I think they had a teddy, and he was very poorly, and they were taking his legs off and doing various mending. And I came and said something like, perhaps Teddy would like a biscuit. And they both looked at me and went, Mummy, here's a toy. And I tried to break through their magic circle. And we can see it when it happens, and it's so powerful when it happens. And I think it's powerful for three particular reasons around education. The first one is that the magic circle gives you freedom to fail. It is not real, it's not real life, you can try new things, and it doesn't matter if you fail. And actually, we're really bad at that in higher education. it allows for this idea of illusory attitude. And this comes from a man called Bernard Suits, who wrote a book called The Grasshopper, which again, if you read no other book on play, this is my, I've got to say, because Bernie's in the room, absolutely second favourite book on learning and play. And then he has this idea of illusory attitude. And the idea of illusory attitude is that you have to be prepared to play. You have to be willing to play. In a way, it's kind of picking on the idea of you need to give yourself into playfulness. It's possible to take part in a game and not to play that game. But by engaging in the illusory attitude, you are saying, I am going to be part of this magic circle. I'm going to do that. And again, I think in education that's quite powerful. That gives people the freedom to fail, to think about things differently, to think about different contexts, to understand different rules. And finally, intrinsic motivation. My background was originally in video games and how video games affected education. And I got quite concerned about the ongoing rhetoric of, if you have a video game and you can tempt people to play a game, then it will motivate people. And then that kind of moved on to the idea of gamification, that you can add points and badges and leaderboards. I understand gamification theory has moved on a lot since the original ways in which it was used, but it was all about this extrinsic motivation. If you do X, then you get to play a game. We're going to use these game techniques to motivate people to do things they don't actually really want to do. And that's when I started thinking about, well, games can be intrinsic motivational. They can have lots of these intrinsic benefits, but play, by its definition, the magic circle, to play it is voluntary. To play, you're doing it intrinsically. Play is its own reward. And actually, if you look at our higher education system, it is effectively an extrinsically motivated system. We motivate students by giving them assessments to do. So I had a colleague who said to me recently that in the middle of their course, they'd had to change the assessment. So they had originally done 2 summative assessments, one small one halfway through, one large one at the end. And they'd had to, for various political reasons, change the first assessment from summative into formative after the students had done it, which is not great practice, but not the end of the world. And this colleague actually had a student come up to her afterwards and say, I can't believe you made me do that assessment. It's utter waste of time. And the whole point of doing it was from learning from doing the assessment, not to get the grade at the end. But students have decoupled the point of actually learning with the reward for learning. And I think where play can bring that back in is about you doing it for its own sake. So in terms of trying to think about how to create playful learning experiences, I think trying to create magic circles is a good way to think about it. So as I said, I started around working with games. Oh, I should warn you as well that I'm going to do 2 rants during this talk. I did originally have a little sign, but I left it at home. But you'll know when they're coming. One of them will be coming on the next slide. Originally, I started working with games, and then I started getting into thinking more about play. And that got me thinking, and this is just, there's no theory or science behind this. This is me sitting down and going, what is it about learning that is playful or can be playful? And what are the sort of things, because lots of people teach in very, very playful ways, but wouldn't necessarily call it playful learning. So what are the ways that we could, and what are the things that we could do and bring into teaching that would make it more playful, that would allow students and teachers to co-construct these magic circles? And the basic things that, I've got games on there. Now, this is my rant. My problem with games, and the reason I've moved from play to games, is because of serious games. And I hate the term for serious games, because the whole point of games, and the whole point of games in learning, is that they're not serious. As soon as you take the serious, you've just taken serious in games and you've left nothing. What is really important about games is that they provide these non-serious alternative contexts to play. And I can see why we use the term for serious games. It's to do with making it acceptable. But what we actually need to do is to make play acceptable and to have those conversations around why we need to be playing in education. So that's rant number 1 out of the way. That's my little rant as well. But then there are things such as thinking about make-believe. I'm going to say the word role-play as well. I'm not a fan of role-play, but a lot of kind of role-playing pedagogies are about stepping into another world, creating that magic circle, thinking about making believe. elements such as surprise. Now, we did some interviews with students a few years ago, and one student told me about this amazing assessment that he'd been given, where he was an art student, so they can kind of do more wacky things there. And he said they just got in, and the lecturer said, we're not going to do the lecture today. You've got a surprise project. You've got 24 hours, and you're going to be assessed on it tomorrow. And he said it was really stressful, but it was really good fun, because people worked in groups, they just did it together, and it was this element of surprise and excitement. The use of humour, use of what I'm calling physicality, which is kind of movement and getting up and walking around. And I'm getting much, so it says she's standing in one place, not moving anywhere. But with students particularly, but it does get you to think, actually, if you see the world afresh and you question everything, then you can have, anything's possible. Whereas these are the two most common questions my students ask me with. Will I need to know this for the exam, and are we going to be assessed on that? So somewhere between preschool, early years, and our students at higher education, something has happened, and I'm convinced that is to do with the way that we test students and the way that we privilege assessment over learning. So I'm going to, how long have I got, Helen? Oh.
15 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll start talking really slowly then. I wanted to come back to failure as well, and I've been starting to try and think around theorizing failure and theorizing failure in learning. So I'm presenting this as kind of a bit of a brain dump to get some feedback on, and actually I think that the importance of failure, the kind of important metrics of failure and learning are to do with the feedback. So whether you know why you failed and you could do it differently the next time, and to do with the impact. So does it matter whether you fail or not? So if you have something which is in this quadrant down here, which is your low feedback, your low impact, this is something that doesn't really matter. So if, for example, I'm on the BuzzFeed website, which I spend too much of my life on, and I want to see which Disney princess I am, and I turn out to be Rapunzel rather than Merida, it doesn't matter, I failed, but I don't really care. So you've got this kind of trivial fail. So things that if you're thinking about serious learning, it could be the kind of multiple choice tests that you do at the end of a Moodle unit. They're not assessed. It doesn't matter. You get a score at the end, but it doesn't give you a great deal of feedback. Thinking what I'm calling a critical fail, though, is at the other end. Now, obviously, these are continua, and I've just kind of put a block in there. So there are various things in the middle here. Something that has a high feedback, but low feedback but high impact, A-level results. So they really matter, but we get a score back. A lot of the exams that we do in summative assessments, we don't really give students a lot of meaningful feedback. They don't necessarily know what to do better, as evidenced by the fact the various resit things that we get. And actually, I think at the moment, higher education is really kind of around that critical fail area. Then what I'm calling a serious fail. So this is a high impact, but lots of feedback. And the best example I could come up with for that is failing a PhD, which is, or failing on first submission. So it matters a lot, there's a high impact, but actually you get screeds of feedback and you know what to do to fix it. So it is fixable. So not ideal, very serious, but you know what to do differently next time. And what I'm really interested in, and where I think we need to be giving students more focus, is this micro-fail, also known as the Monkey Island fail. So these opportunities to get lots and lots of feedback that don't really matter, that can be cumulative, that can give the opportunities to be thinking about how can I learn and how can I fail and how can I get used to failing and how can I build resilience through failure and how can we talk about failing? And I don't think we're very good yet at providing these opportunities to microfail. But I did want to give a few examples of various things that are going on in higher education projects that I've been involved with that I think might be touching on the microfailure. So this is an example which a colleague of mine, Claire Hampshire, who works in physiotherapy in MMU, designed a few days ago, and I helped her with the sort of game design side, but the idea was very much hers. And this is a game called Staying the Course. And what they found with their physiotherapy students is that as part of induction, they would introduce students to all the different services that were available. And that students would then immediately, because they'd basically been told, here's a list of people you can go and see if you've got various crises going on in your life, they'd go away and they'd forget it. And then when said crisis happened, they wouldn't know where to go. Whereas this game it was a board game, takes an hour. These 4 people who were playing it never met. They met each other about 5 minutes before. And it uses humorous scenarios to get students, it's an excuse to talk about the types of things that might happen in a way that is removed from it being directly personal and isn't actually asking the students to give anything of themselves, whilst being a bit competitive as well. That gives it the other edge. But again, it's just providing that magic circle through the artifacts, through the fact there's a start, there's a dice, it's obviously a game. It provides the scaffolding to create a magic circle. And what they found is that students who've played this, they really enjoy it, but also they remember a lot later on about the services that are available from the university. Another example that you're going to have a little go at trying later on this afternoon is a game called Conundrum Collection Creation. And the idea of this game is very simple, that groups are given challenges, and they go off in groups and they do the challenges and they evidence what they've produced. Now, the idea of conundrum collection creation is based around kind of some of the motivation theory about games, that 3 of the key reasons people like to play games is solving puzzles, so that's your conundrums, collecting stuff and making sets, and that's your collection, and building stuff, making things, that's your creation, and working collaboratively. So what this game does is it's designed to do all 3 together. It can be run over the course of a day. This was a case of when it was run for international students as part of an icebreaker, but it was also about using digital technology. So you can basically change the challenges to whatever context. But it's very much about problem-based learning, about students being able to pick challenges that meet their own levels of difficulty and work in a variety of different types of creative ways. And again, we're going to be doing a very quick example of that after lunch. I know they're doing a lot of work with escape rooms here, which is really, really exciting, because escape rooms is my new hobby that doesn't involve drinking. Now that I'm getting a bit more grown up, I have to find that a small corner of my life doesn't involve drinking. And I did my first escape room in London about 3 years ago and was just amazed by how different it is as a pedagogic model. For anyone who hasn't done them, basically involves you and some friends being locked in a room for an hour and solving physical and mental puzzles to try and get out. And because I've got a couple of escape room projects on at the moment, I was trying to explain to my head of department what that involved. And he just stood there going, so you were locked in a room? It's like, yes. With people, yes. And you could see going through his mind, this is hell, why would anyone do this? Just nodding. But I'm really interested in how we can use these pedagogically. So we're running a project called Edge Escapes, which is supported by Erasmus+, which is about getting sixth form students to design escape rooms as a way, particularly looking at STEM curriculum, maths and computer science. We ran it last year, and we got, I was quite amazed because we got 12 sixth formers from a local school, and they were running it as a 2-week enrichment project. And I kind of thought by the end of it, we might have one game that was passable. And the games were absolutely amazing. The amount of creativity and problem solving and innovation that these young people came up with. In the end, we got 3 games that we ran at a conference, and the feedback was they were as good, if not better, than some of the commercial games that we're running. So We're running that again this year. We're running it with some of our students at the moment. But I think as a pedagogic model, going beyond playing games to creating games and game development process is really important. And then I've got to plug the Playful Learning Conference because I'm here, because I know this is the kind of audience that would love it. So, and I know there's quite a few people here who were there last year. So the Playful Learning Conference was kind of an answer to me going to a lot of conferences on games and going, these conferences are about games and play, and yet we spend the whole time sitting in rooms listening to academic papers, and it's not really fun. So it was about, let's get a conference and take out all the bits that we don't think are fun and try and put other things in there instead. So we do accept academic papers. We want it to be academically rigorous, and that's fine. But we also accept, so last year we had a poet who took people and did something strange to them in a tent. I know Jim was there. He might one day when he stopped rocking, tell me what actually went on. We had keynotes that were completely interactive, and everybody was getting up and running around, and we had escape rooms running, and we had somebody walking around with a VR headset and a dolphin on the head. And the whole thing was just about trying to keep the academic rigor that we have in play, studies and education, but doing it differently and thinking about how could people learn from that. So we're running it again from the 12th to the 14th of July in Manchester this year. With the close there are 2 more days left in which I think it's Friday is the call for papers closes. If you did want to get something in and you can't do it by Friday, just drop me a line. I'm sure we could accommodate. And as I say, it's about rethinking what is the conference and what is play about. So this is my last slide as well. This is a cake that I made. I was really proud of it. I put it on the internet and everyone said it was rubbish. But I wanted to show it as an example because technically that's an internet fail, but it taught me something about my friends mainly, but about cake. And it didn't matter, it still tasted really nice. So I kind of wanted to leave you with that message that actually learning is about failing better and about learning how to fail. And to do that, I think there's 3 things that are really important. So we have to rethink assessment. It is not enough to rethink pedagogy. Assessment, unfortunately, we have students who have been trained to focus on the assessment, and we have to change that. We need to create opportunities to play. We need to create those signifiers that are about play. It's not about games. Games is one way to do it, and that's great. But actually, there are loads and loads of little ways for all teachers and all students to add a little bit of playfulness in. But also, we need to have the dialogue and discourse about play. On a kind of serious note, I'm starting to think now about the sort of critical pedagogies of play and the fact that play can be a very exclusive and privileged act. And we need to think about who are we privileging by adding play, and who are we leaving out? What about the people who don't want to play? And why don't they want to play? And how can we include people in play? And I think this is because most people that research play love play and kind of get it. I don't think everybody does. And I think we need to start having these conversations, both as a community and with our students, about what's really going on when we play. So that was me. Am I on time? Yes. Thank you very much.